Shut up and sit down.
By all means, go for it. Have fun.
Yeah.
Just leave me alone.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us more and more.
I'm against being shitty to people.
You can't research your way into understanding somebody.
One way or another, I'd rather have the fight now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fight for Liberty. Got an awesome show for you guys tonight. This show, as all other shows, are brought to you by Nug of Knowledge. If you guys haven't already, go on over to nugofknowledge.com and look at all the stuff they've got over there. They have premium CBD, CBG, and Delta-8 THC products, whether it's in flower or pen form. They've got CBD honey. They've got all sorts of stuff. So go on over nugofknowledge.com, and if you want to help support the channel, which I don't know why you wouldn't, because you also get 10% off, use promo code UNITE. And so that helps out me, that helps out the guys at FSM, that helps out everyone that you love, really, if you really think about it. So go on over again, nugofknowledge.com, use promo code UNITE, and get 10% off of your first purchase. Tonight's show, I have been meaning to have this person on. Reed has been telling me again and again and again that I need to have this person on my show, and schedules haven't worked out. And then finally, it is. So, Mr. John Molnar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, man. It's great to finally be here.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were a congressional candidate in 2020 in Utah. You are a veteran in the Marines, right? I got that one. Army. I'm sorry. Yeah. I had my intel incorrect. I need to fire my research team, man.
I was intel, so, hire me. There you go. Problem solved.
There we go. All right. And now you are how you've traversed across the country to get away from the dystopian Christian hellhole that is Utah to the bastion of freedom of Florida. So congratulations on that.
Thanks. It was a long drive. It was like 34 hours, and we did it in 4 days in a little Cadillac ATS with my wife, my 6-month-old son, 2 puppies. Yeah, it was a nightmare drive.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all.
Nah, it wasn't that bad. We broke down in Tennessee. The car overheated. And that was about the only hiccup we had. Other than that, it was actually pretty smooth sailing. It was just a really long drive. And luckily we did it in the Cadillac and not my Camaro, so it was a bit more comfortable.
There's that. Yeah, Camaro would have been rough. I did about half that length of a drive earlier this year with a Lincoln, but I was with me and 2 of my friends and their cat, which did not like being enclosed into small spaces and was spazzing out for most of the drive. That part wasn't fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. See, my German Shepherd pup, he's new to cars and he's been really bad with motion sickness. So we were really worried about him puking all over the car like he normally does if we try and take him out back home. But we gave him some of those pet CBD treats, and he was good the whole drive. Thank God.
Nice.
Right.
Man, CBD. I already told you guys once today. Now he's telling you CBD. It's a good thing.
Check out that link.
For sure. So I always like to start out by just kind of getting a little bit of your testimony and how you came to both the movement and the party. So I'm curious, first of all, when did you first call yourself a libertarian?
Called myself first a libertarian probably when I made the switch over. I actually started the campaign as a Republican. I tried to do that whole fix the Republican from the inside thing at the very beginning of it. And then as it was getting closer to the primaries, I realized, the platform I was running on was way too libertarian based. It was what I had been called almost the whole time was, you sound like a libertarian. And that there was no way they were going to let me through the primaries. Everything was just getting set up that way. And so I kind of just decided I'm going to ditch it. I called up the Libertarian Party, asked if I could run. They talked to me about what I was running on already and kind of how I felt about certain things like abortion, gay marriage, things like that. And everything just kind of spiraled out from there.
that CBD is hitting.
Man, I'm jealous. I haven't been able to get my card out here, so I haven't been able to smoke for a few days, and it's been driving me crazy.
Yeah, I did a lot of bounce states where it was hella illegal, including Utah, and had to go like months at a time without, and it was not a fun year.
Yeah, Utah drove me nuts because, like, I had all my family in Utah for a long time, like my parents, my brother, and a whole bunch of cousins and stuff. And so, like, all my support when I got out of the military was actually in Utah. And for a long time, Utah didn't have a medical marijuana program. So I got out of the military and was in California, went back home there to try and work everything out, but I didn't really have anybody. And so it was like you kind of had to choose. Do you want cannabis or do you want your support group? And without the cannabis, there's no chance. So I was in California a lot, try and come out to Utah, and every single time it was like, if I didn't have a plug who could hook me up, it wasn't happening. So that's really like one big drawback to Utah. And even with the medical marijuana program out there that they got now, it's complete bullshit.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of states' medical programs are.
Yeah.
I'm in New York, and you have to be like dying to get a card. Like you need to have like cancer or like MS or like endometriosis or like, you know, some just like permanent, just life-altering pain thing. Like nothing that won't kill you. And so, you know, my anxiety or the ADHD or like any of the other things that you know people used to joke about, like, oh, my back hurts and I have trouble sleeping sometimes. Give me that's not a thing. I wish it was a thing because my back hurts and I have trouble sleeping a lot.
Right. See, like that was one thing that California did really well because it was like $40-$60 at most. If you're paying more than about 60, I'd say maybe top out at 80. If you're paying more than $80 for your medical card in California, you're getting ripped off. Because you just go in and you pay some dude who looks like he's about to sell you a timeshare at the end of it, and just tell him, I got back pain or I can't sleep, and they hook you up with a card. Out in Utah, they were a lot stricter. Like I was good for all of my stuff being a vet, but my wife, with a ballot initiative that they pushed through, they ended up gutting out some of the stuff that got pushed in the ballot initiative once it got to the state legislature. Like they took out autoimmune disorders, and that really affected people like my wife who has lupus. And so it's just, the rules are all over the place, and it really just needs to be recognized for the medicine it is. It's for everybody. It has all types of help with a bunch of stuff. I know Normal was putting out an article today about how it helps. I can't remember the name of it. I retweeted it, but it helps with certain afflictions in pregnancy as well, and shows almost no side effects to the baby as far as they can see. I think it was a small study they recently did in Israel. So, I mean, open it up, study it, and let people have at it. It's a natural, right. It's a naturally occurring plant. You can't criminalize nature.
That's the key phrase. I got to have a fun conversation with some of the guys from Decriminalize Nature over the weekend up in Michigan, and we were talking a little bit on Twitter the other day about like the therapeutic language. Right. I've always been a fan of that because I'm obviously a fan of recreational drug use in a lot of cases. I'm a fan of recreational drug legalization. I'm a fan of allowing people to do it for whatever reason they want. However, I'm not a fan of the connotation that the term recreational marijuana sets for a lot of people. Right. And there's a lot of people that are fighting it because what they see is like Harold and Kumar go to White Castle, and they're not seeing, like you or me who like actually use this to function in our everyday life, even though like I don't have something that a lot of doctors would consider like a bad illness that needs to be treated with something,
But that's the thing is you've got a lot
necessary and illness at all, but just use it to chill out.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem is you have a lot of doctors right now, trying to advise people on stuff. And I even have that with the stuff I deal with. I go in and I talk with my doctors at the VA or wherever else, and a lot of them still don't see marijuana as being something of a medicinal value. But after spending about 3 to 6 months with me, they change their mind real quick.
What are you normally using it to treat for yourself?
So I have, I don't like to actually use the term post-traumatic stress disorder, but that's what I have. I usually talk about it more from anxiety, depression, or insomnia point of view, just because people understand what those are. When you hear PTSD, a lot of people kind of mix up what that means, or they make it out to be like you're some psycho, crazy, violent person who you can't be around. And there's just kind of a lot of misconceptions about it. So for me, I feel like it's easier to talk about it from the point of depression, anxiety, and insomnia, because those are things that people typically have a better understanding of. You know, it helps me when I'm feeling sad, or it helps me with my anxiety and how I don't like to be around other people. I have a lot of social anxiety, or just in general, you know, my wife goes nuts because a lot of the time we can't go to like shows or things like that if I can't be able to smoke out, because I'll just end up, you know, shaking in the corner, or if it gets real bad, then I'm like vomiting and breaking out in cold sweats, and it's just not a good time. You know, me not being able to sleep can go anywhere from 48 to 72 hours on absolutely no sleep before I'll finally crash for about 4 to 6. So being able to smoke cannabis will actually allow me to sleep at night most of the time. So sometimes if it's really bad, I got to pop some melatonin in on top of that. But either way, that's a whole hell of a lot better than any type of sleeping pill the pharmaceutical companies want to pump you full of.
It's true. Yeah, I'll have to add you to the melatonin caucus in the Libertarian Party.
Do it.
I'll explain that later.
All right. I think the only one caucus.
But yeah, actually, is the main one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There's just
a little bit of a lag on them.
I think the only caucus I'm even somewhat involved in is like the Star Wars caucus for the Libertarian Party.
That's a good caucus, though. So I definitely am a fan. Yeah, so the insomnia is definitely one of the main ones that I like. I don't like to say the word need, because that makes people think other things, but like the one where like I definitely can't quite function correctly without cannabis is with the sleep schedule. Like I can get through my day. It's not always great, especially if it's multiple days in a row of not being able to smoke, but the sleep schedule gets fucked up like kind of right from the get-go.
That's a hard thing, because if your sleep pattern is messed up, it affects you in so many different ways. Like a lot of people don't understand that if you're awake for a certain amount of time, eventually you'll start hallucinating. That's happened to me. I started experiencing that when I was in the military, where I had an incident where I was on a field training exercise for multiple days, and they messed up my schedule and didn't realize that me and this other dude that I was working with both had not been allowed our legally required 4 hours of sleep every night. And we'd been up for multiple days. I started hallucinating. And, you know, when you get into a situation where you're full kitted up, you've got rifle, ammo, all types of things, you start hallucinating. That's a big problem. But you got normal everyday life. People have to go to work. They have to drive their cars. They have to function.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not able to sleep, you're still going to have some very serious issues. And so even if all you're doing is just a normal person using cannabis to help you sleep, to function throughout your daily life, it'll be far more beneficial than the sleeping pills that the vast majority of Americans currently take. We've got a culture of people that are functioning based off of things like Adderall or whatever else to get them through the day, coffee nonstop to just function and keep themselves awake, and then taking sleeping pills every night. Instead of that, just get a good night's sleep by smoking a little bit of weed.
Yeah. There was quite a while where I was drinking nonstop, like energy drinks and coffee and sometimes Coke to keep me like through the day, and then like drinking and smoking to finally put me off at night and getting like 4 hours of sleep and repeat. But that was when I was working a really ridiculous job, and the hours were insane. But yeah, it's a problem, and I think it's a pretty common one at this point, especially people our age, that, you know, we've just kind of been going nonstop for most of our lives. Like we had cell phones in like high school, or like really shortly after high school, and like since we were 16, it's been somebody's always been able to get a hold of us. We're always doing something. There's always something going on. We're like trying to like stay up and have conversations with our crushes, and like it's just perpetuated. Now it's like a decade later, and we just don't know how to turn off at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And that being able to turn off is so important, to be able to sit there, decompress in order to be able to go back and function even harder the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. It's something that most people deal with because we're so connected now than when it used to be. I mean, I'm 30 now, so, you know, smartphones and social media kind of came out about that time you're talking about being in high school. And so I'm still old enough to be able to remember middle school when it was like, you got home phones. If you're out of the house, there's no getting a hold of you.
Right.
And it was nice having that disconnect and not always being connected to people 24/7. Now my phone goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm hearing about, hey, we've been trying to reach you for your car's extended warranty. And then my sleep for the whole night is messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then we added, on top of just like the phone communication, then we added social media, where it was like, oh, you're connected with people across the country, across the world. So there's always going to be your friend, at least one of your friends is always awake now.
Yeah.
There's never a time where you don't have a single friend that's awake, especially for me, because most of my friends are insomniacs as well. So we're all awake all the time. And so like, it can be, I don't know if you use Clubhouse at all, but I've been using that a lot more lately. It'll be like 2:30 in the morning, and I'll just be like, I can't really sleep. Kind of want to just like hang out. And I'll pop open Clubhouse, and like 10 people will be in a room hanging out. Like I know 8 of them. I hop in there. Next thing I know, it's like 5 a.m. because we've just been having like a spirited discussion, and my sleep's fucked. The sun's rising, and I'm like, all right, might as well brew a cup of coffee because I'm not sleeping.
See, I don't have Clubhouse yet. They didn't have it on Android until very recently. And I mean, I'm an Android diehard. I'm not a big fan of Apple's iPhones. To me, it's like the equivalent of a cell phone with training wheels. I mean, it'll do what you want if you just want to go in a straight line. But the second you want to try and take it off-road, do some jumps or tricks, like there's nothing that compares to an Android in that regards. So I've stayed off Clubhouse. My big kind of vice for the middle of the night tends to be YouTube. I end up down those YouTube spirals, just going crazy on finding, like, it'll start with like, let's look at Buddhism because I haven't checked that out really. And all of a sudden I'll end up on, I wrote this song on piano while peaking on LSD, and I just got to hear what it sounds like.
I mean, that does go hand in hand with Buddhism. So.
Yeah, it's that typical all YouTube spirals, whether you're ending up on, nuclear energy or peaking on LSD videos, or just back to Mr. Beast. Like, YouTube's great for that.
It really is. I get concerned where my YouTube rabbit hole ends up sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just like 2 hours later, and I'm like, how did we get here? Like, my dad was going down his own YouTube rabbit hole, signed into his account on the TV, and somehow it got to like this YouTuber monologuing about explaining some plot hole in Gilligan's Island. And I'm just like, why are we watching this? What happened? How did we get to this point in the evening?
Wow. Man, I haven't seen Gilligan's Island in forever. We losing?
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. I hate internet.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned earlier that you actually started the race out as a Republican.
Yeah.
What? And that you kind of got pushed out by the primary process. But had you already like talked to libertarians or like been part of the movement before you Did you consider yourself part of the liberty movement before then, or were you a Republican wholeheartedly?
No, I was a Republican before that. I mean, I'd heard that I was a libertarian ever since I came back from Iraq. I think it was like one of my friends from when I was about 13. I had just come back from Iraq and we were talking politics, and they were actually the one to introduce me to libertarianism, because they just said, "You sound like a libertarian," and I was, "What? What's a libertarian?" And so I started Googling it and stuff. But I mean, I was born into a family that was Republican, and I was raised a lot of my life in Utah, so the Republican Party was what I knew. And I mean, when it came to things like small government and fiscal responsibility, that was stuff that I really agreed with. So I just figured I'd try and fix the party from the inside. But apparently, when you're running on things like fiscal responsibility by slashing the pay for politicians and cutting their salary down to the median household income of their voters minus the same unemployment rate, didn't really seem to be something they wanted. And so, like, I had been the only congressional candidate who had declared for about 6 months, and 6 months later, the former Utah State Republican Party's chair's wife ended up declaring, and they were running it like crazy as she was the first candidate. And I'd been there for 6 months already, meeting with people, going, "What the hell is going on? Like, I've already been here. What do you mean she's the first one to declare? Like, I've been doing this for 6 months already." And so it kind of just spiraled out from there. There were more and more people declaring, and it was just kind of being acted like I didn't exist. And so it was getting close to it was getting closer and closer to the primaries. And I mean, we were about, I think, January, before the primaries were coming up, and I was just kind of getting that feeling that, this isn't going to work. The Republicans aren't going to let me through the primaries. I got to find something else. Either I got to run as an independent, or I got to run libertarian, because I'm pretty sure the Democrats don't want me, and their fixation with the Young Turks is not something I'm down for, being Greek myself. So called up the Libertarian Party, and we had a good talk, and things just went from there.
Nice. And how are you liking it so far?
It's been good. There's been a lot of stuff going on lately that's been a little sketchy, as we saw with what happened in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. That's been a bit concerning. But, I got a lot of hope for people like Justin.
Understandable. Luckily you're in Florida.
Yes, luckily I'm in Florida, not New Hampshire. But, I'm seeing Justin Amash coming in, and I agree a lot with what Justin Amash has been doing, and hopefully guys like him keep coming in. I mean, it would be great if we could get people like Thomas Massey to come on board as well and make that switch, or try and make those bigger connections and get the party to actually be a party. Because right now, one of my biggest frustrations with it is really the Libertarian Party acts more like a social club at best and a cult at worst. And we see that a lot with the caucuses, more so than anything. I mean, that's why I've tried to stay out of the caucuses, is because I'm an atheist. I don't like religion, and the caucuses act like a religion. I mean, the political parties themselves are bad enough for me. I mean, the whole Founding Fathers' first arguments in the Federalist Papers were warnings against political parties in and of themselves. So for me to be part of a party on its own is a little difficult. And then you start getting into what goes on in the caucuses, and it's just, I don't want any part of it. That's not what I'm here to be for. I want to advance individual.
It's factions inside of Sorry, say that again. You cut out.
I was just saying that, I want to be part of advancing individual liberty, not being part of a clique or the good old boys club and who's friends with who. I'm not here to social network. I'm here to try and make sure that my family, myself, my freedoms are protected. And in so doing for us, those will then expand to everybody else. Because when you're focused on your sole goal being for individual liberty, you can be as selfish as you want, because that actually benefits everybody else as well, because your whole goal is just leave me alone and I will leave you alone.
Right. And at this point, like, we're seeing a tangible threat. Like, I mean, we saw last year, like the most draconian systems that we've seen in America since like World War II. But with President Biden, it's no longer like rhetoric and from the national level either. It's like real tangible stuff. We're talking about us being labeled as domestic terrorists. We're talking about the president threatening his citizens with nukes and F-15s. Like, this isn't a joke anymore, and they're making it pretty clear that they're not joking anymore.
And that even occurred during Trump. I mean, everything with COVID that happened and got us into these lockdowns, people losing their jobs, that all started under Trump. That was all Trump and Fauci. Mm-hmm. There wasn't really that much pushback against it. And it's been one of my biggest frustrations with the Libertarian Party is that we've got some of the biggest examples of tyranny going on in the nation, and yet we're preoccupied with who gets to be in control of the party.
Right. So actually, speaking of that Biden thing and Massey, I saw a clip yesterday of Massey speaking on Biden's comments that I want to play for the audience to get your take on here real quick. I don't know if you already saw this or not.
I did.
I rise today because just last week, our president of this country spoke about using the nuclear option. He wasn't talking about getting rid of the 60-vote rule in the Senate. He was actually contemplating a nuclear conflagration with the citizens of this country, with the patriots of this country. He said they should get F-15s and nuclear weapons if they wanted to keep this government in check. Those aren't the words of George Washington. Those would be the words of King George. Imagine if a dictator, just imagine the dictator of North Korea or the despot who runs Iran had muttered or stuttered or uttered these words like our president would and did. There would be an international outcry today to have that dictator removed. We need to hold our chief executive accountable for these words. And our chief executive of this country would do well to understand what the Second Amendment is really about. It is about keeping an overzealous executive in check. It is about securing all of the other liberties in this Constitution. It is about the patriots who are willing to tell the government, we are in charge.
We're back. Sorry, guys. My entire internet just decided to crash. So luckily, there's a shitty old backup that we got new internet, but we kept the old one hooked up. So
all right,
we're on the shitty old one now. Let's see if that's better. But okay, like that was got to the end of the clip though. So there's that.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
I mean, it's Thomas Massey, man. How can you be mad at him? He's right, though. The only thing I would say maybe a little different is I think he gives Biden a little too much credit. He kind of comes from the point of assuming that Biden is the actual president. And my opinion the entire time they selected Biden to be president was that the reason they took so long to pick who was going to be vice president was because they were deciding who was actually going to be president. Mm-hmm. So Biden is Biden. Go back through the Obama days. Biden's memes with the Obama days, they're still just as true today as they were back then. It's Joe Biden.
True.
Like, he says a lot of things, but does he really know what he's talking about? No. And that's no surprise here that he got everything wrong with the Second Amendment. He was wrong in saying that it didn't allow you to own cannons. He was wrong in saying that if you need to take on the government, you need F-15s and nuclear weapons. That's not true. I fought in Iraq. We got our asses kicked by dudes in flip-flops and dresses.
Right. Laughs in Viet Cong. Like,
yeah.
Just, oh. I do love how he's, that little dig he got in there, though, of like, imagine if some dictator stuttered or uttered or muttered these words. Yes. I was like, nice.
Yeah. No, it was good. He's right of that, though, in that, we shouldn't be having a president speaking in this way about our constitutional rights.
Yeah. So do you think that this that something like given the assumption that Biden actually knew what the fuck he was saying here, do you think that kind of a stance is worthy of removal from office, like that kind of a threat to citizens?
Depends on if you take it as a threat. Is it because he didn't? It's Biden, so I have a hard time making an assessment with it, because Fair. Is he actually making a threat, or is he just really thinking that, hey, look, if you want to take us on, you got to have nuclear weapons? You don't, but it's Biden. I mean, this is the guy that used to have articles printed about him by The Onion talking about how he was, during the Obama days, washing his Trans Am in the front yard of the White House, and essentially just like Daisy Dukes and no shirt. It's Joe Biden. I don't know how you can take him seriously, really.
That's fair. So that kind of negates the follow-up question, which is, do you think that if the Republicans take it as a threat, would you be worried about like extra divisiveness from another mock like impeachment trial? Just that.
I mean, it's the Republicans, so I think they'll take it as a threat because it's their way to push their base to rally behind them. I mean, you never let a crisis go to waste, essentially, is how the politics work. And so it doesn't matter what gets said or what gets done. It's always going to be spun way out of proportion. And I'm not agreeing with what Biden says. I'm not excusing it. I still think it's wrong. But just, is it an actual threat? No, I don't think it is, because it's Joe Biden. But they'll absolutely run with it.
Yeah. Do you think they'll run as hard with it as the Democrats ran for the last 4 years with everything that Trump did?
I don't know.
Could be interesting.
I don't know, because the Republican Party hasn't exactly been very pro Second Amendment for my entire life. So, you got people talking about how Trump exposed all the rhinos in the Republican Party. And yeah, he did, because Trump was a rhino.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Trump increased bans on things like bump stocks. Trump expanded federal spending. Trump was a rhino. He was not small government. He was not fiscally responsible. He did not support the Second Amendment. So I think the Republicans really, at this point, I don't think they're going to care too much about Biden's comments and backing the Second Amendment. I think they're too caught up in critical race theory at the moment and transgenders and sports. Like
I mean, they're playing like kind of controlled opposition in the culture war, and they're allowing themselves to get distracted by the same bullshit that the right is allowing itself to get distracted. And so, yeah, it's I mean, they're a fucking joke, right? They're two wings of the same fucking party. We've known that for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could be talking about stuff, if you wanted, as the Republican Party, to be able to actually make a difference and attract people to you, like discussing how the housing market in the United States is completely out of control right now. I mean, this is all across the board. I just bought a house down here in Florida that's under construction. But I was looking across almost the entire southern states and statewide, and I was having problems finding something that was affordable. And I already had a home to be able to sell, make a profit, and go take that money somewhere else. You got a bunch of people who are getting priced out of ever being able to own their own home. These people will be permanent renters. And if the Republican Party or even the Democrat Party really wanted to make a difference and take full control, they could take something like that actually has applicable practicality in people's everyday lives and work on some real solutions to be able to do it. But instead, everybody's bickering over, again, race or transgenders the way they always do in order to keep everybody distracted and fighting with each other so that we don't focus on the actual issues in this country.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of your exodus to Florida and stupid issues, Reed reminded me to tell you that, not being able to watch porn wasn't a good enough reason to leave Utah.
See, I'm never going to be able to run for office again because Reed's made that so many times. It's just never going to happen. So it's cool. I'll be down here in Florida. I'll do the private sector. I'll do my own thing.
Dude, have you ever heard of Florida? Do you really think that's like even close to the worst thing the politicians in Florida do? You're running against Florida, man.
Yeah, but I came out here to get into the private sector. I've spent 8 years in the public sector between years in the military and my congressional campaign. I've done the public sector. So I'm going to take some time to do things from the private sector. I mean, one of the things that you hear a lot of with people talking about libertarianism and free market capitalism is, how does that do for things like the environment? Like, how do you handle the environment from a free market perspective? I'm kind of done with public sector. So I want to tackle things from the private sector. And the things I really like are fishing, plants, and animals. So that's kind of going to be my goal going forward. Is I'm still going to be in the public. I'll still keep that persona going. It'll just be shifting to try and tackle some of that issue from the private sector and what that could look like from a free market solution to set as an example for other people of what this could be. Because
That's awesome.
I'm a big car guy, and that usually gets thrown up of, oh, you can't care about the environment. And I've cracked a lot of jokes over the years about people like Greta Thunberg and we have to ban cars to save the environment. I don't agree with that. I have a lot of different ideas on how you can handle things with the environment. I'm more convinced that the issue isn't so much how much emissions we're putting into the air, so much as the issue being with deforestation, our growing deserts. I mean, we're seeing it right now out west. That's where I'm from. I've spent my entire life split between California and Utah. I know what the deserts are like. I know they're growing. They're getting hotter. They're getting drier. One of the questions I've been asking a lot on Twitter and stuff right now is which comes first, the rain or the forests? Because that's some of the stuff I'm diving into. And there's been some research out there, it's not that extensive, to show that when you reforest an area, not only does it bring in, or does it keep more of the moisture that does come down, but there's been some interesting research that I've been diving into a little bit that shows that potentially forests can actually attract rain. Mm-hmm. So if we want to talk about changing our environment, are we really that concerned about people driving their cars? Or are we more concerned with places being torn down, forests being torn down? I mean, you want to talk about emissions, even that in and of itself is the wrong argument, because in Utah, it was always talked about how, the cars on the highway are what's causing the air pollution. We have really bad air quality in Utah. We get in the winter what's called our inversion layer, where the pollution just sits there. It gets trapped with the mountains in the valley in between the two sets of mountain ranges we got out there, and it doesn't go anywhere. And the cars are always to blame for it. Meanwhile, nobody talks about the fact that about 67% of our energy in Utah came from coal. Coal being by far the worst way, the most polluting way to generate energy. So you got a bunch of people constantly running their heaters and their AC all year round because Utah's got extreme temperature fluctuations. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly being done by coal. And if you got a Tesla, yeah, you can run your mouth about my Camaro all day long, but unless you're running that thing off of solar or wind power, your Tesla is actually worse for the environment than my Camaro because you're using coal to charge it every single day.
Yep.
And that's not even getting into the possible consequences of the lithium mining and everything else that goes on to actually create those batteries for the Tesla that you're driving. So I want to get into the private sector and start showing some things on, conservation, taking care of animals, things like sustainable, regenerative, and organic farming, things of that nature, because that's the stuff that I actually am pretty into personally, and I didn't really talk about it that much during my campaign. And I'd like to do more of that.
Yeah, that's one of the weird conundrums about libertarianism, is that a lot of us try to run for office, but then we also have real passions. And the whole point of libertarianism is that the government isn't the person to solve those problems that we're passionate about. And we end up becoming kind of hypocrites by running for office, or we just kind of discard the things that we care about and become callous and shallow and just run on oh, we don't care about anyone. We're just, the private sector will fix it all, and just end up looking like jackasses. But it's a weird conundrum that I've a culture shift in the liberty movement as a whole over the last probably 2 years, where we have a lot more nonprofits and companies and PACs and organizations working outside of the party to do things, and then those people are able to work on that throughout the years, and then once every couple of years maybe they pick a race where they're hey, what I've been doing has given me a reputation in the community that I can handle this thing and help scale back the government overreach on it without letting it go to shit, because I clearly know how to handle this thing because I do it in the private sector. And then boom, now we have mayors or city councilors or attorney generals or whatnot, and they have reputations and resumes going into this because they've been doing work outside of the party. Because let's be real, no one gives a shit that for me personally, I've worked on 12.5 campaigns in the last year and a half. That doesn't mean shit to anyone outside of the party, except for a couple of people in the other parties that care about some kind of experience. But if I'm going to run for office, being well, I ran this other campaign last year, nobody cares.
Yeah.
They care if I ran a food bank last year, though.
It's funny you say ran a food bank, because actually one of the big inspirations for me wanting to get out of the public sector and start moving more towards the private sector has actually been Mr. Beast on YouTube, because he took all of this stuff from YouTube and started his own food banks, and he does a lot of stuff like that, and people get to see it. And what people don't understand is that's free market capitalism. That is you being able to take the funds from the business you do to generate the hobbies and passions and charitable work that you were really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you can't do in the public sector. It doesn't matter how much you want to. You're always going to have pushback. I saw that when I was in the military, when I was in Iraq and wanting to actually help the people over there. I got pushback on it. I got pushback with things when I was running for Congress and wanting to do. So why keep bothering with that when you can just go to the private sector and show people, hey, look, this can work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I hate bringing him up. People are going to think that him and I are a thing or something. But what Reed and I were talking about earlier fits into this conversation perfectly. Because we were discussing how a lot of people have really warped opinions of the necessity for capitalism and free market everything to be present always, and the misunderstanding being present on both sides. So people on the left think that capitalists are always for profit and everything they do has to be for profit, but a lot of capitalists are actually like that, or at least think like that, and they don't understand how often they partake in socialism, because they've been trained to think that all socialism is evil. And so for example, Reed, he's he works, he makes money at the fruit of his labor. He works in a free market capitalistic society. He has a show where people give him money and he provides them with content. But then also, he's sent me money to help me buy a ticket to go to a convention or to get to PorkFest, and he donates to things and he helps people, and he's a good person and he cares about other people. And those two things can coincide, and they actually should. And, we can have the perfect anarcho ANCAP society city where everyone is operating in a completely free market, but there's still a fuck ton of like neighborhood parks that are community owned, and a bunch of people put in money together and maintain it together. Like, the only way for it to really work well, like for everyone, is a mix.
Yeah. And that's it. You have to have a mix. It's the same in all things. You have to have the good of all things. Every single part has some points to it that are good. I hesitate to even make this comparison, but I mean, even during the Holocaust, as horrible as it was, is how we came up with the vaccine for polio. There can be good in all aspects. Not everything is good just because it had one small piece that was, but you have to find what does work and move forward from there. Should you go out and kill a whole bunch of millions of people just to be able to come up with a vaccine? Absolutely not.
Definitely that. 100% always.
No. But it doesn't matter how bad you think something is. There's always a good point that you can take from it, even if I disagree with people completely. I mean, you've got people like Ocasio-Cortez and stuff like that who I disagree with almost entirely, especially when it comes to things like the environment, because they're so extreme. But on the point of should we take care of our planet because it's the only one we have as of right now, yes, absolutely, I agree with that. And if you can find the starting point and boil it back down to that kind of base generalization, then you've got a point from which you can work with anybody. Rather than being hung up on, is it coming from a socialist perspective? Is it coming from a free market capitalist perspective? And just refusing to work with it because it's not the side that you agree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. We need conversations with other people that believe different things than we believe, and otherwise, we're never gonna be able to get anywhere. And that goes for like that's like something that everyone needs to understand, but we definitely need to get better at as libertarians as well. It's like there's a lot of people out there that want to work with or that have similar ideas to us on like certain issues here and there, that we can work with them on a like probably half the issues or at least a quarter of them and get things done. I'm more excited about what we've been able to do through our connections with duopoly this year than anything we've done as a party. You know, we're getting bail reform, criminal justice reform, ballot access reform, getting constitutional carry passed in a bunch of states. We're doing a lot of, like, we're moving in the right direction. We've had a couple of states pass some, like, really ballsy, like, federal nullification things that, like, they don't necessarily do anything, but they give the state the authority to just say fuck you to the federal government whenever they decide they actually want to. That's happened in, like, 3 states so far this year. Like, we're really doing some stuff. And I think we can... there's a little bit of this divisiveness on the national scale that we can use to our advantage to try to like push decentralization, because a lot of people are really scared of the other team. And it's like, okay, why don't we just like make sure that if they get the nuclear football, it doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's make sure that whoever is in the White House, it doesn't fucking matter because they don't have that much power. And that, like, I can talk to Democrats here in New York and be like, do you really want the possibility for another Trump to happen again and for him to be worse than the last Trump because we gave Biden all this power? And they're fucking terrified by that notion. It's like, okay, you want President Matt Gaetz and Vice President Marjorie Taylor Greene to have even more power than Trump had? Is that what you want? Like,
yeah.
Or should we scale back the federal government? Like, okay, thanks. Right.
It's just annoying because everybody, like I say a lot of the time that everybody hates fascism unless it's their preferred form of fascism. Because really, everybody hates what the other side does, but they want their side to be able to do the exact same shit. And that's the thing in, libertarians are selfish. And yeah, I kind of am in the fact that I want to be left alone. Like, I don't want any of them to have that type of power. And if I were in, I wouldn't want me to have that type of power. That's why I ran on things like direct consequences for the actions of the politicians with the policies they enact. So they actually have to have that thought process of what goes through is going to directly affect them, so that they're not making those power grabs. They can't be exempt from the laws that they passed on the rest of us. They can't just keep making their same $174,000 a year starting salary after they shut all of our jobs down. I don't want any of them to have that power. If they shut our jobs down, they decide to do that, I want their paychecks on the line to back it up with the money that they make in their own pocket to go with the words that are coming out of their mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked your plan for like adjusting the congressional salaries to be the median income of their constituency. That's like, because I've always hated the like Congress should make minimum wage argument, because that's bullshit, right? Like,
yeah, because minimum wage pays whether you actually work or not. It just pays you for clocking in and out, and salary just pays you for existing with the company or entity for that year. It's an annual salary, so you just get paid whether you work or not. Same with hourly. That's why it should be a performance-based pay package. I worked most of my life in commission-based jobs when I'm in the private sector, and I don't get paid if I don't actually bring something of value to the table. That's something I'm comfortable with and I think is fair. And especially when you're talking about a political sector where they're pushing economic policy on the rest of us, it affects our paychecks, yet they keep getting paid no matter if they do good or bad.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. As someone who's also been in commission-based jobs for quite some time, that it's just better. I prefer it myself, because then I can like imagine if you as a congressman, you're coming up, you're even in Utah, right? You're like, upper middle class, like your area is kind of like maybe middle class. And so you're making like 50 grand a year because that's your median income. And that's not bad. But then you like do some really fucking awesome things to bring like Google into your congressional district. And now you're making $150,000 a year because that's the median income, because you have a bunch of C-suite like executives in your congressional district. You have a fuck ton of people spending a lot of money. There's a mall that just popped up to service these people. There's a bunch of new restaurants that are really expensive and paying their people really well. And now you're making good freaking money. And all you did was help your area. Like, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And specifically, like, I really, really dislike the minimum wage thing, because it's like you said, it doesn't have that incentive structure, but also, like, let's be real, like, I have very little love for politicians, but at the end of the day, it's a lot harder to be like a congressman than it is to work at McDonald's or Walmart or something like that. Like, they shouldn't make minimum wage. That's stupid. Like, most of these people have bachelor's or master's degrees. Like, they spend a lot of time like working up to this level. Like they deserve a little bit more than that. Like,
yeah. I mean, they get a lot of vacation time too, it seems. So
I mean, there's that. Yeah.
That was one of the reasons I wanted Congress, was because it was like the easiest, laziest job I could do that got paid really good and more vacation time than teachers. So, I mean, even if I cut the salary down, because my whole thing was I was going to voluntarily abide by that if I had won, just to set the example and be the kind of guinea pig. And even still, I mean, my congressional district was, the median household income was $73,000 a year. I also added in minus the unemployment rate for your district. So mine was about 3%. That brings you down to around $68,000 a year. That's still good money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't be mad about that. I would take that all day long as the guinea pig.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the vacation time they get. Congress is out of session on break all the time. Who cares? I'll be in the Bahamas half the time.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that platform plank, and I think it would be a cool thing for like a bunch of libertarians to run on kind of together in 22, and even try to get some other candidates from outside the LP to kind of like sign on to a pledge to do the same thing. That would be kind of neat.
That would be so cool, because especially like when you counter in the unemployment rate into it too, it really just kind of kicks it up a notch. Because if you do just the median household income, then you could have things like raising the minimum wage, or we'll just bring in really big companies to our areas and everybody fighting over that. But what happens when you start developing certain areas or you start raising the minimum wage is you do get people that get left behind. If you start increasing how high tech your area is, you're going to have people in that area who are residents who are going to either be forced out, or they're going to end up, worst case scenario, being homeless. You're going to have a lot of people ending up on unemployment. So by adding that unemployment factor into it, you have to take that into consideration, so that you can't just say, okay, well, I want to raise, I'll just bring in Amazon or Facebook or Google or Tesla, and then I'll be able to make a whole bunch of money because Elon Musk's salary just blew the median household income way further up. You have to take into consideration the lowest person in accordance with the highest person. So that way you're actually representing everyone on an economic scale as realistically as possible.
Yeah, I like that a lot. What happens if we become too successful and all of our congressmen are making millions of dollars a year?
Is that based on how it is now, where they give themselves a raise, or off of the median?
Off the median. If we just become a fucking super awesome country, and now our tax dollars can't keep up with our congressional salaries.
I don't know. I'm thinking that's some problems that I think everybody would probably like to have if everybody was a millionaire. I mean, without taking into consideration what the value of the dollar would be if everybody was being a millionaire, because essentially you could just print money to the point where you're giving everybody $1 million. And then you've got stuff like, what is it, Zimbabwe, where it's $1 trillion bill that's worth less than a penny for the United States. So depending on how it goes, I don't think you'd have very many people complaining.
It's fair. Yeah, unless we drastically fix the tax structure and make Dan Berman the head of the IRS, the taxes would probably increase high enough to keep up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could either increase taxes or just cut some of the unnecessary spending that we do plenty of, and balance things out that way. But I mean, you've got roughly, 574 members of Congress between the Senate and the House, and everybody's a millionaire. We're spending a lot of money on them already. Easy way to cut it might just be to say our technology is pretty advanced enough, as we saw during COVID, to where we don't have to send representatives to DC. They can do it from their home state, where they actually have to be around their constituents and have that actual physical connection to the people they're supposed to be representing. And we can save all that money on their travel expenses and everything else that goes along with it, and increase their salary or cut their salary, whatever the case might be. There's a lot of different ways you can play with it.
Yeah. How do you feel about the 17th Amendment? Is that the one that made the direct election of senators a thing? Whichever. 16th. I always get the teens mixed up. I got the Bill of Rights down pretty well, but the teens not so much. But just the concept of, how would you feel about going back to where state houses elect senators instead of the citizens?
I'm not quite sure, because personally I kind of am wondering if we've evolved technologically to the point of no longer needing representatives to begin with. I mean, you can have the Electoral College essentially function as a collection of people being able to vote by their phone, and each individual district would then count for that senator or that House representative, rather than being each vote counts as one. You would just take the majority share for that area, count it as if it were a representative, and it would be an immediate vote. People could vote directly on each individual spending bill, each individual legislation that comes out for whatever civil rights comes out, military, whatever the case might be. I think technologically we've really evolved past the point of even needing actual politicians at this point. For the most part, there could be some that you could state might necessitate some needing to be there. president, if he actually functioned like he's supposed to and oversaw more of the day-to-day operations rather than trying to make all the laws as Congress is supposed to do, that one might be worth keeping. Obviously you still need some Supreme Court justices and things of that nature, but when it comes to actual representation and being able to vote, propose laws, propose legislation, bring it forward, really, I think our technology has moved to the point where we could do that ourselves directly from our mobile devices and make it much easier. It's one of the problems I've had with the whole talks about mail-in ballots and voter IDs and stuff like that is really our phones come equipped now with biometric software. They're all connected to the internet. We all are 24/7. Really, voting should be mobile at this point. And then you can expand it to not even need representation through a person. You can actually do it yourself.
Your mic sounds a little bit muted now. Just kind of sounds a little less.
Good now.
You're a little bit crackly, kind of out of nowhere.
How about now?
It's a little bit better. Yeah, there we are.
All right.
Cool. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, as an anarchist, like you're speaking music to my ears as far as like kind of getting rid of Congress. I would love that. As far as like the unfortunate like existence that it has currently, I do kind of like the idea of going back to having the people in Washington picked two different ways. I've always been a fan of the way that it happened originally. And to your point, with doing it kind of remote, like the senator could kind of hang out at the state house and like really be a part of that and like really just be ingrained in all the stuff that was happening in the state politics, and then just be, voting on national stuff, like but actually really having a pulse on what's going on in the state, and then the representatives actually having a pulse on their constituency. Or like you're saying, I like doing what you said for the House and my thing for the Senate, and that would be great.
See, and that would be something that I would happily compromise on. I don't have all the answers on this. It's really hard to try and figure it out just on my own, because we're getting to a new point in society where technology has advanced so far, and I'm not a tech guy. I do engines and mechanics, and I get down and dirty and outside, but when it comes to technology, I'm not that great at it. So I can get an idea of what we possibly could do. But I mean, anytime we start talking about a crazy revolutionary idea like that and trying to bring something new to the table, it's going to be something that's going to have to be well thought out, really hash out the arguments and try and figure out what's going to be the best way to work it. So if it came out to something like, okay, we're going to keep the Senate, but yes, for the House, we're going to go ahead and try that. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, let's do it. I don't see why not. I mean, like I said, we saw it during 2020, and I was thinking it back during the Paris Climate Agreement when these people were all flying out to go talk about climate change in their private jets, private limos. And even at that time, it all could have been done over Skype. Our technology has evolved. We need our politics to catch up. Yes.
100%. Yeah, we need to get our fucking politics like into the 21st century, because it's still in like the 18th century. Like,
yeah,
for fuck's sake.
Well, it doesn't help that we have people who have been moving to DC who should have done what I did in Florida. Like, DC is really essentially nothing more than the nation's most posh retirement home at this point. I mean, right. Biden and Trump have been proof of that one. So, yeah, that was another thing I ran on, was actually maximum age limits for office, just because we need that cycle of new ideas. The generational gap in understanding is just insane at this point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I fucking wholeheartedly agree. Either age limit or term limit, one of the two.
I think both.
Huge fan of both. I'm an even bigger fan of. Yeah, because they don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, the fact that Spike Cohen was the first millennial to be on the ballot is like, the fuck?
I mean, there's a lot of bashing on millennials, but there's an article about a week ago, I want to say, that came out talking about middle-aged millennials. I turned 30 back in October, and that article is what really hit me. Holy shit, I'm getting to be middle-aged. But yet, all of our politicians tend to be senior citizens. Like, these are guys who, if they were in the private sector, would be told that they have to start taking out their 401ks. They have to start taking out Social Security. And yet they're the ones who are making all the decisions for the rest of us who are actually still in the workforce, still raising our families or starting them out, still buying homes. These people are done. That was part of the issue with my whole agenda, was based on installing consequences for the people who are making the decisions. And you aren't having to deal with the consequences of the policies you're enacting if you're going to be dead by the time those policies go into effect.
Right. Amen. Yeah, there needs to be some accountability held for these people, and at the moment there is absolutely none.
And the accountability doesn't have to be people and us waiting every single time an election cycle comes around to be able to try and vote them out of office. If they just had direct consequences for their actions, they would be held accountable by their own decisions.
Yeah, because clearly we're not so great at the voting them out of office thing.
No, we're not. We just keep voting the same people in over and over again. It's how Nancy Pelosi's been in office forever. Joe Biden, same thing. Like, the guy was old and a joke during the Obama days.
Mm-hmm.
He was voted into office.
It was a decade and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I was in the military under him and Obama. And now I'm 30 and I joined at 17. And here we are with Joe Biden in the White House when he should be in a retirement house.
Mm-hmm. Or a prison.
There's that possibility too.
Although, I mean, he might be able to plead insanity.
Compassionate release.
Maybe. Go be with his dogs.
Yeah. I hear they're not too well trained, so take that.
Unlike him, he's very well trained.
Yes, he is. I've seen some of those comments about his dogs and talking about how the dogs are stressed out. And I'm sorry, I raised German Shepherds. I'm on my third one right now. And no, if your dog acts like that, it's just not trained.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, German Shepherds are some of the best behaved dogs there are. So
absolutely. They're incredibly smart. They're in the top 3 smartest dogs. I think Border Collie is the number 1. The Standard Poodle is second. And then German Shepherd is third. Like I said, this is my third one that I've raised, and they are insanely smart dogs, but they know how to push boundaries. And if you're not on top of them, they will get away from you. And they're a big dog that is capable of actually killing someone ultimately. And if you're not on top of that, you're asking for trouble. You have to have them in check. You have to be that alpha personality. You have to keep them under control at all times, and you can never let them slip up because of how smart, how big, and how capable those dogs are.
Yeah. They're like a very large, violent toddler.
Yeah. And they show what type of person the trainer is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You can tell a lot about somebody by how their dog is with its behavior.
Mm. It's very true. Yeah. And he clearly isn't that like alpha personality that you're describing.
No, he tries to be much more laid back. And I mean, it was cool during the Obama days with the cars and the Onion articles and stuff, but you're trying to be president now. You can't even control your dogs. How am I supposed to trust that you can control the country?
Right. Well, I want to go back a little bit to what you were talking about with your ideas of going into the private sector as far as like animal conservation and nature conservation go. Okay. Do you have any like solidified ideas of how you want to do that, or any projects that you want to undergo?
Yeah, so my wife and I have been talking a lot about what direction we want to take it, and we're going to keep everything really public because we want people to see it. And so we're getting ready to start up everything here very soon. I've got my house under construction, should be closing around the end of July, as long as everything goes well. I'm a little nervous about it just because of the way the market's been going. You know, out in Utah, we saw a lot of people getting their contracts canceled on new construction homes because the price of lumber would go up, or the copper wiring prices would go up, and the builders would cancel the contracts on the buyers and tell them come back with 50 to 200,000 more dollars. So it's a little nerve-wracking right now to see how things are going to go, but hopefully it all goes well. And if it does, we'll be starting out everything from there. My educational background outside of high school, I dropped out of college. I went to culinary school, so my background's in food. So that's where I'm going to be starting.
Hey, same. I dropped out of culinary school. Nice.
So that's where I want to be starting, is in the food sector. I want to get into regenerative and organic farming, kind of along those permaculture lines, and trying to grow a lot of organic and sustainable food that's a little bit more specialty produce, trying to show people some other options that are out there. I really want to do some stuff for vegan type foods. You know, there's been a lot of talk about getting people off of animals, and with people like Bill Gates possibly in charge, you don't know if that's really going to come down. And so we've been kind of experimenting a little bit with it, trying to see, hey, if we had to, what's that going to look like? And that really came more not from us wanting to become vegan exactly, but more from the food shortages that we saw during COVID. Because we saw those pretty heavily out in Utah, where eggs, meat, stuff like that was really hard to find. And so it's just been kind of a journey continuation of the food to try and figure out what other stuff is out there that we can keep doing. So that's some stuff we want to do, and then working it into some conservation stuff from the profits of that, and going from there. You know, we'll be running some stuff on YouTube and social media, and then the farm itself, and trying to take those profits and putting them into things like conservation work for reforestation efforts. There's guys like Jeff Lawton, I forget his name. I think it's John Leo, who's a Chinese guy who's done some stuff out in China, reforesting deserted areas that are no longer fit for farming and grazing and have caused a lot of harm to the villages. And he's gone out there and reforested areas, brought back those grazing lands. I've seen stuff with Jeff Lawton doing similar out in, I think it was Jordan. He did it in trying to regreen the Middle East. And so we want to do some stuff similar to that. Now, granted, those are some pretty big aspirations. I'm not quite sure how much we'll get to there, because it all depends on how much everything will end up flowing. And so if everything all goes well said and done, I really want to do some stuff out west in the United States, because that's where I'm from. I know that area. I know what it's like with California, Utah, Arizona. Those are my old stomping grounds. You know, I've traveled road trips nonstop. That's where I used to play, was Nevada and all those areas. And so I really want to do some stuff trying to help out with the deserts out there, and trying to do some conservation stuff. You know, we've got things that have gone endangered, like with the United States, when the colonialists were first here, long before my family was here, killing off like the buffalo herds to try and starve out the Indian populations. And so, you know, trying to find something like that where maybe we can buy some land, section it off, and try and get some buffalo on it to regraze those lands, do it properly so that it's self-sustaining, where essentially we don't have to do anything, and try and figure ways like that to be able to make those kind of impacts for the environment in a better, positive way.
That's awesome. I have been becoming more and more and more of a fan of like agorism over the last probably 6 months. I've met some more agorists, as well as I've become significantly less confident in the stability of the empire over the last year or so. Understandably, you know, I can't imagine why, right?
That's the thing, is, I mean, I've got all these things I'd like to do for the wildlife conservation, but really, first and foremost, it's got to come down to food security, because we saw that with COVID, that things are here. I mean, like Martha Bueno was just going off about stuff going on in Venezuela, and I heard other people talking about, people don't understand the food shortages going on out there. And the only thing I can think is, yeah, people might not understand it here yet, but holy shit, if things keep going the way they are, we are about to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the big things that drove me out of Utah with my family, because I had, during the campaign and when COVID kicked off, my wife had just become pregnant. And so I've got our son now, my wife, and it doesn't matter how much money I had in the bank, how much food storage I had at the house. Eventually that all runs out. And if you can't find food to buy, you're starving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to find a place where I could go find land enough to at least be able to provide food for myself and my family. And so that's what we're doing down here, but we're going to just try and scale that up and move forward from there.
Are you familiar with Rex Longhorn in Oklahoma?
That sounds really familiar.
He ran for state chair in the LP out in Oklahoma. He lost to Kevin Hobby. It was actually a very close, very, very great race. They were very gracious to each other. But he's doing a project out in Oklahoma called Liberty Mountain Farms, where he's got like about an acre and a half on the side of a mountain, and being completely self-sustainable and trying to bring people out and teach them how to do it too.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I've been watching, like my wife, actually, she was mad about it at first. Now she's actually getting into it herself, because pretty much for the last year when everything kicked off, I got really heavy into those YouTube spirals that led me to guys like Kevin Espiritu over at Epic Gardening, Pete Canaris over at Green Dreams Landscape, and James Prigioni, which are the three big ones that I watch constantly for things like permaculture, to try and learn more about this stuff, and now trying to actually go out, buy the land, and do it myself. So, I mean, like, if people are trying to learn it, there's plenty of stuff out there for people to be able to do. You don't have to have a bunch of land. I got much more than a lot of these guys are growing on, just because I wanted more. But you don't have to have a bunch. Even if all you've got is a front yard, rip up that grass. It doesn't serve you any purpose, and put in that food forest right in your front yard.
Yeah, I love it. And because, we always talk about decentralization, and a lot of times we focus way too much on government or even like big business kind of stuff. Like, maybe we'll talk about it, but we don't talk about like the decentralized food markets and decentralized energy and decentralized like things that are necessities to live.
Yeah.
Because we're reliant on some like big conglomerate dairy producing company just to get milk in our cereal. Like, that's not good. That's not sustainable. That's not anything that we believe in as libertarians. Like, decentralization is key.
It's not something that we used to believe in this country in general.
Right.
I mean, you got back in World War II, you had the victory gardens. You had everybody growing food. And now we've outsourced our food production to very few but large companies. And that puts us in a weak situation as a nation, like we saw with COVID. Because if you have very few people but very large businesses doing it, if something happens to one, you're feeling it across the entire nation. California, people love to talk smack about it, how much, if they succeed and do their own thing, we'll be perfectly fine. Not if we're doing things the way we are now, because California produces a shit ton of this nation's agriculture. I'm all the way out here in Florida now, and it cracks me up going into the grocery store because most of the produce is labeled grown in California. Florida is a big agriculture area too, but even out here, a lot of the food's coming from California. I saw it back in, I think it was 2015, where we had massive droughts in California that affected the actual hometown I'm from in California, called Fallbrook, which is up in North County, San Diego. And it's where almost all of your avocados are grown in the United States. Like, if you buy an avocado that says grown in the USA, it was grown in Fallbrook, California, where I'm from. And so when those droughts hit, all those avocado farms went under. You had mass foreclosures, and we saw guacamole prices around Arizona, California, all those places go up to $50 an appetizer at your restaurant.
What the fuck?
So right now you got similar stuff going on. You got farmers in California having to rip up their almond groves. You got farmers who are having to, or ranchers who are having to slaughter their cattle early because they can't provide water for these things. Now, if you drive on the 5 in California, or I think it's just north of Bakersfield, heading towards Monterey area, you got miles of feedlots that are just, you got cattle out there in the mud doing absolutely nothing but sitting in the dirt, and they rely on being able to bring in water and food to those cows. They're not grazing, they're not free range. This is how our cattle is grown. This is where your beef comes from. You can drive that road. It's the Highway 5 in California. Drive it and you'll see it. You'll pass by a whole bunch of Congress-created dust bowls where it used to be farmland. Now you're going to have the same things going on with a lot of what's going on with the beef. You're not going to be able to get things like almonds. You're not going to be able to get things like beef. You got corn being ripped up like crazy. And corn, while not a lot of people eat corn itself, I personally hate it. I can't stand corn on the cob. It's fucking disgusting. Not a fan. But corn is what gets used a lot of the time for feed in things like chicken, pigs, and a lot of your livestock.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff is going away right now. So people want to talk about how we can get rid of California, not at the rate we're going, because California is where a lot of your stuff is grown. But you're going to see how bad it's going to be if you got rid of California with how the drought's going right now, with everything getting slashed down. If people don't start learning how to grow their own food like we used to in this nation, people are going to starve.
So you hate corn. I have an important question because you already brought them up. How do you feel about avocados? Because I
love avocados. Man.
Okay. All right.
I'm San Diego born, from Fallbrook, where they're mostly just, I think the only thing they really grow out there is avocados and strawberries. I mean, over in Temecula, they'll grow a lot of your wines come from Temecula. If they're coming out of California, you've either got Napa Valley or Temecula, essentially, aside from Carmel Valley. But yeah, avocado, man, there's so many good ways you can do avocado. Like when I was in culinary school, I used to do this dish for my chefs during our tests, because our tests were all on the fly. It'd be a 5 to 7 course meal. And so for my appetizer, I decided to cheat. I'd always do the same thing. And I would do crab stuffed wontons. I'd fry them, roll them up more like a cannoli shape. I'd stuff them with crab, and I'd do a dollop of guacamole right on the tip of them. There's so many things you can do with avocado.
I'm with you. I'm a big fan. My girlfriend hates avocados, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Find a new one.
But she loves corn.
Dump her anyways. No. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of corn. I think about the only way I can do it is when it's in elotes, and that's like regular corn on the cob with just some butter on it is disgusting to me. I hate that about summer barbecues when I show up to people's houses and they're doing it that way. I'm like, this is why I don't like hanging out with white people sometimes. But
Well, as a white person, I'm a big fan. Kind of grew up on that shit. So
yeah, my wife did too. She grew up on corn on the cob. I mean, her grandpa was a rancher down in Texas. Used to breed horses for races and stuff, and was pretty big on that. So, that's the stuff she grew up on. I'm not a big fan, so we argue about it every so often on whether or not corn on the cob is any good. Now, you put it in bread, cornbread, I will absolutely chow down on.
There you go. That's fair. All right. Well, before we wrap up, tell everybody how they can find you, follow you, stay up to date on all of the cool things that you're about to do, or support what you're doing.
So real easy. Right now, I'm essentially just on Twitter. Everything's getting ramped up to be put out there once we close on the house. I'll be spiraling out from there and launching everything that way. So otherwise, Gear 6 Alpha, it's right there on the screen. So go check that out on Twitter. It's also my Instagram handle, but I'm not really on Instagram that much. So Twitter is definitely the main way I communicate. If you want to see anything that's coming out, just follow me on Twitter. I will put out announcements of everything going on Twitter. I'm shifting away from politics. I'm starting to not talk about it anymore. This is actually my last political podcast I'm going to do, and we're going into all the new stuff that's coming on. So just follow me on Twitter, Gear6 Alpha, or A for those who don't speak NATO phonetic, whatever. And just stay tuned. We'll be in touch.
All right. Yeah, guys, definitely go give him a follow and stay on board. I'm excited. Like the kind of stuff that you're talking about is like really what I want to also kind of be involved in and helping facilitate and like platforming that kind of stuff on the show. So I'm super stoked. I'll have to have you back on when it's more up in full swing and you can talk about some successes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes about 5 years for a farm to really get in full swing, but you know, we'll be getting going, and anytime you want to have me back, do some check-ins and stuff, I'd be more than happy to.
For sure. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. John, thanks for coming on. This was great.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Guys, we will be back here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, whatever the fuck, with the Cajun Libertarian, Noel. It's going to be great. Doing it at a special time because we were both on a Clubhouse room last night with about 40 different podcast hosts. So if you wanted to be a part of that, you missed it. It wasn't recorded. I was about to like pitch, go watch that, and then I remembered that it was Clubhouse and it wasn't recorded. So, oops. All right. Well, guys, again, thanks for watching. We'll catch you back here next time. Until then, keep up the fight. Hey, fighters. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and support the fight by going to Linktree/Fight for Liberty.